I always have this incredible FOMO building up to something big whenever it's in, Bitcoin. And then it's like a little like balloon that just
It's
deflates
always a
very
whimper, isn't it?
quietly. And you're like, I was on the blower to my dad, like, listen, Dad, this thing's no longer a risk, man. It's being de-risked. Larry Fink just said this and this and that. And I'm like, what are the objections? As if the next day it's going to go to a million. Oh,
Yep.
but people like him go, come on, son. I've seen this movie 2,000 times.
Yep.
So what on earth happened? Like, tell us what you saw, at least from an on-chain perspective.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So there's a whole lot of complex dynamics. So I think the first thing that's certainly to me, I love when I see market dynamics that I'm like, oh, I didn't actually think about that. I've thought about it in isolation, but this concept of traditional finance, if you buy a stock, they normally operate on something that's called like T plus 3 or T plus 2.
Mm.
You'll notice you go and buy a stock, it takes 3 days for your money to clear, go to the exchange, go to the clearinghouse, the stocks to change hands. So now you've got this situation where some guy's buying and selling BTC or one of these ETFs. It takes 3 or something days for that trade to clear. You're getting numbers coming in from Bloomberg. They're all priced in dollars. Like, okay, but how many coins are moving around? Well, it depends what the market makers are doing. And it's just this whole circus of like, God, this is inefficient. Like, it's just that
Oh,
there's so many, like, you've got to give huge amounts of respect to even the Coinbases, right? The exchanges that have kind of pioneered the Bitcoin space, they have built all this infrastructure. They don't have clearing houses. They don't have regulators to sort this stuff out. They had to build this stuff themselves. Even our futures markets, right? The BitMEXs of the world, they had to build their own liquidation engines from scratch. And that's where the perpetual future came from, right? These things didn't exist. They will, by the way. Perpetual futures are absolutely going to make their way into TradFi because they're a fantastic vehicle. But
mhm.
anyway, we're kind of seeing like all this infrastructure. It's two worlds butting heads. And I think that I love the way, I think it was the most Bitcoin thing I've ever seen, the way that Bitcoin dragged the SEC into the mud with it and said, you want to approve me? You're doing it my way, right? You're going to have your account compromised. You're going to have price whipping up and down. And then the absolute creme de la creme is everybody who bought the ETF is now down 18% because Bitcoin's like, I'm volatile, let's go, and just rips it all the way down, right? So the
Totally.
dynamics at play here, you've got GBTC, which is 600 and whatever it was, 620,000. By my, I forget the number. I think it was something like 23,000 or half a billion, right? Of half a billion dollars of outflows from GBTC. These are customers. This is going to keep going for weeks and months, I would suspect. These are customers who've just hate GBTC. They want to move to a lower fee ETF. They want to just get their coins out. Some of them may be allocating to other ETFs. Some of them may be buying spot. Some of them may be just going, I hate this Bitcoin thing. I'm never doing this again. There's a whole lot of reasons why GBTC is going to be this big reshuffling problem for probably for weeks to months.
Mm.
You've also got, I think it was about 28,000 BTC went into these other ETFs. So there was net buy side, which is great. I believe that on the volume, traded volume basis and on asset inflows, they were historically significant. So volume, I think it was the biggest in the world. So, Bitcoin broke records. But the problem is you're splitting all this stuff over 11 or 10 ETFs plus GBTC, which is already a product before it was an ETF. So like the mechanics
Mm.
of this whole thing, it's not like a clean situation. Then you've got T plus 3. So the coins move at a different time to the trades and they got to do it at closing basis. And then you've got weekends where Bitcoin keeps moving and the traditional
Yes.
finance market. So it's just a world trying to like reconcile itself. So it has been a real circus. There was leverage building up into this event. So we've seen, as I was saying before, futures and options hit multi-year highs of 617 billion or whatever. So there was a bit of leverage that got washed out. A lot of people bet very long into the 49 peak and lost it all, right? Which is as typical.
Yep.
And the other thing, the final piece of the puzzle is long-term holders, right? These are like in the on-chain world, people have held their coins for at least 5 months. And the reason we do that is statistics, right? Basically, they're less likely to spend. We hit a level where in 2012, in 2016, in 2020, we hit a level on their kind of profit level where they kind of are in enough paper profits. We were talking about this before,
Mm-hmm.
that they always start to spend just a little bit. And we had about 75,000 Bitcoin by these long term holders get spent. Not all of that sold. Some of them may have got moved around. Some of them may have, it's complex, but we're at a level where people start to go, yeah, 55%, maybe I'll just de-risk a little bit. Maybe I'll sell a little bit of the news, not the whole news, but a little bit of the news.
Yeah.
So you see some of it's a big complex mess. And this is why, like, I put out a tweet just before the halving, in my opinion, was priced in because we're literally flat on the whole year, right? Even though it's only the 15th, we're flat. We're flat on the year, but how long is it priced in for? And that's the big question I think a lot of people don't get. It's like, how long for? Because in my view, the second that these ETFs start trading, it's a whole new world. No one can predict what kind of inflows they're going to see. No one can predict how many people are going to spit the dummy over GBTC. Some people may just stay there, right? Some traders may prefer GBTC because it's got the liquidity and the size, and that's what they need to put on, $500 million positions or whatever it is. There's all
Mm,
sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of mechanics that you just can't predict. So we're kind of in the
totally.
uncharted world.
How exciting. I know,
It's great.
absolutely. And we're the small group of people that are really just following like every sort of little update. The average person, it just hasn't quite registered yet. But yeah, to your point, I mean, there were quite a few things you said there. Firstly, you got all these different ETFs. So from what I understand, there's only going to be a handful of winners at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so it's really initially, it's like, how are we competing? We're going to compete on fees. We're going to donate to devs. What are we going to do? It's all very fascinating. Okay.
One way to make sure that you do lose is call your ticket DeFi. That's a guaranteed way to go to zero. Good luck
Yes.
to good luck to them.
Yes. Say goodbye to retail for that. And then, yeah, to your point earlier, GBTC, they've got a 1.5% fee, which you think to yourself, that's not competitive, but they might just be catering to the traders, as you say. So they don't care. So people are
They've
going
done
to
the
pay
calculations.
1.5%,
They've
and
done the
they'll just go,
calculations based on
yeah,
like if we drop to 0.25%, are people really going to stick around? But they're like, if we stay at 1.5 and we lose like 30% of our customers, we're still going to make more money than if we drop our fee by 90%. So
totally.
they've done the calculations. They've just worked out, let's lower it to just enough that we can still fleece people and get money.
Yes, and then you've got this sort of T+2 or 3, as you say. What's going to happen on the weekends? Then the question is, okay, you got all these independent financial advisors, and suddenly, there's people who are going like, well, now the floodgates are open. It's not as if these advisors were sitting on the sidelines going, I can't wait for this thing to be approved,
Chomping
and
at the
then
bit.
suddenly let's smash buy. It's
Yeah.
like I feel like it's going to be a trickle. And
Yep.
I don't know what was making me think it was going to go do a God candle before. I feel so wise, like maybe about 8 days later. But now I feel like it's going to be like a trickle because, okay, you're going to see this interest continue. You're going to see, I think, people continue to sell on GBTC. The question then is, at what point will they stop? I mean, the people with the biggest gains are going to have to stomach the biggest taxable event. So they're going to be like, oh, that's a bit of a punch in the face. So you got to weigh that up there. And then, yeah, over what period are we going to see ultimately the demand, it gets soaked up? And at what point will it be saturated? Um, it's a really fascinating time. And I think anyone who's pretending to have a really good idea of where it's going, I reckon it's probably just
Oh,
blind.
totally.